Elden Ring and Elden Ring Nighttreign. Even though these two games feel pretty similar to each other, they definitely have their own strengths and weaknesses, and that's a given. Elden Ring is all about the journey. You can take it slow, you can take in the views of the Altus Plateau, and you can fight the bosses whenever and however you like. Elden Ring Nighttreign, however, is a completely different game in that regard. You have to be playing at the speed the game wants you to play at. You have to try and match the tempo of your teammates, and you have to make sure you're not in certain areas so you're not taking damage from the storm. These two games are great in their own right, and of course, since they are pretty different games, they're going to have different strengths and weaknesses. And since we're all just waiting for the update where they upgrade the bosses a little bit, I figured we would make a list on things Elden Ring Nighttreign does better than Elden Ring. Let's start with how Elden Ring Nighttreign makes trash weapons viable. One of the most impressive things that Elden Ring does is that it has so many weapons and different spells and incantations. Really everything that's in the game, there's a lot of it. I've played Elden Ring for over 500 hours and I haven't even used a third of the weapons that are in this game. And since it's pretty easy to funnel out which weapons you don't want to use, you're going to be leaving a lot of content on the table by choice. But since Elden Ring Nighttreign usually gives you a few different random weapons each run, you're going to be using weapons that you've never used before. L2 effects that you've never seen before. I really do believe that this was such a smart way to make players use content that they've never seen before. Most of us have one or two build playstyles that we just don't use, and when we do have to use those build styles in Elden Ring Nighttreign, it kind of makes us rewire our brain and use a new playstyle that we've never done before. Or there's even the rare case such as Iron Eye where you're like, wow, there's really a lot of room to improve on bow builds because I've never seen a Souls game where bow builds are super viable. Moving on to our number 2 spot, Elden Ring Nighttreign does a great job at creating skill expression on the player side of the game. Let's be honest, if you look at Elden Ring, the game is pretty simple on the player side. You can move around, jump, sprint, back dodge, roll dodge, and crouch. There's maybe a few mechanics that I've missed that are super minor, but those are really what you can do in Elden Ring. And since your base character is pretty limited, that means that the skill expression on that side of the game is just as limited. One of the more advanced tactics you can do in base Elden Ring is summon Torrent for some invincibility frames, and while that is kind of cool, it's really not something that I ever figured out by myself, and I'd say it's a little bit lame for me to use personally since it feels like an exploit. If I was doing a level 1 run, then I'd say it's on the table, but it's not that skill expressive since it seems like an exploit in my opinion. However, Elden Ring Nighttreign has all these cool champions, and because of that, there is skill expression that you can showcase when you play those champions. One of the more obvious ones is having a game plan on which cocktail you want to create when you're playing Recluse. Pretty much every single Recluse that I've seen in Elden Ring Nighttreign plays like they really don't know what they're creating, and each time they cast their cocktail spell, it's just a random, wow, this is what I get today, huh? It can be kind of funny when you do play her since you don't know what you're doing either, but if you do mess around in the training zone with what her cocktails can do, you can realize that each and every single cocktail has a pretty specific use in the right scenario, and you know what? That's skill expressive right there. Another good example is with Wilder. Since he is a melee champion, you have to be in melee range to revive your teammates. But if your teammate's revive bar is draining and you're not in melee range, you can actually throw your claw on your teammate and that will start the revive process and halt their down timer. Of course, I would say that every champion has these. Obvious ones would be something like Executor showing off their Sekiro skills, or even when Revenant knows what summons are good in what scenarios. I'm sure the other classes have it too, but I really don't know what Iron Eye's skill expression is. I've played him for a few games and he just seems like a pretty basic champion that outputs a ton of damage. I'm pretty sure there's plenty of skill expression in his kit, so I'll mop it up as a skill issue on my end. Okay, so let's talk about the bosses. Something that I really don't like in Elden Ring is summoning. For me, on my first few playthroughs of Elden Ring, I avoided summoning at all costs. It really did take away from the experience of fighting the boss, and I felt like the bosses just simply weren't designed around fighting multiple enemies at once. In my experience, if I ever did summon an AI, the boss would just focus on my mimic tier and I would just be left hitting the boss in the back, and that's not fun to me. However, From Software knew that this game was going to be a multiplayer game, so they had to challenge themselves and create unique bosses that are supposed to have wide area of effect moves so every player is engaged at the same time. How boring would it be if the boss was just focused on the Wilder and the two DPS characters kind of just hit it from the side? It's pretty rare for this game to fall into that cycle, so I'm going to have to say that this game does an excellent job at creating a new boss design philosophy and executing on that properly. The only boss that's a real stinker in my opinion is the Fathom of the Night, because he kind of just floats around in the air and doesn't do much of anything. It kind of reminds me of base game Elden Beast, and that's not something you want to be reminded of. But hey, who knows, maybe he'll get that boss upgrade pretty soon and he'll be the best boss in the game. I guess only time will tell. Okay, so I know that some people are not going to like what I have to say here, but I'm going to say the story characters. Something that I really like about Night Rain is that these are actual characters, they're not blank slate characters, and doing their side quests is pretty fun, honestly. They're not perfect, saying that they're all kind of contained within Lim Vale or the Round Table Hold, but they do have some interesting stories to experience. I did the Wilder quest line, and without spoiling it, some parts of it do involve the Duchess, so I did look up some of her storyline, and they are connected pretty well. There's something about playing as the champions that makes me feel a little bit more close to the characters than what a blank slate is, because they're actual characters and not just an avatar. Not only that, but following the storylines and figuring out what to do isn't a pain like it is in Elden Ring. If I'm ever following a questline in Elden Ring, chances are I have to use a guide to know what to do and where to go. I know that From Software does that by design, but it's not really something that I'm wholly in love with. Having to have my second monitor open at all times just to see what I need to do can be a little bit tedious for me. A good example that I can think of right now is having to throw an oil pot at Alexander to progress his quest. Of course, Elden Ring does have the benefit of being open world with multiple biomes, so the quests can be more open and creative than just Lim Vale and the Round Table Hold. It really is a completely subjective way to consume these quests, but I find myself liking how Night Rain does them more. Before we get to our last talking point, I thought I'd throw in a little minor one that I had on my list, but I didn't really know where to put it. I just really think that the Round Table Hold in Elden Ring Night Rain, including the music, is just way better than base game Elden Ring. I enjoy the NPCs a lot more in Elden Ring Night Rain, and I think the music is just way better. I know that's kind of a minor and super subjective take, but I thought I'd throw it here. Okay, and finally I want to mention that Elden Ring Night Rain strengthens the overall From Software community. The Souls community can be really good and really bad at times. I find that Reddit is a really chill place to talk about Souls, and find some really funny Souls memes. However, I've noticed that if you ever criticize Elden Ring, some of those YouTube commenters will really find every way to attack you in any way possible. Not very nice. I do want to say that I think the From Software Souls community is pretty chill, and I've seen a lot of nice people in the community. If I ever go on Reddit or a thread forum, there's always people that are willing to help other people if they're struggling with a boss or looking for build ideas, and it's really nice to see, saying that I always play these games and I'm pretty active in the community myself. Even though this game does strengthen the community, I have to say that it doesn't do it good enough in my opinion. The main game of Elden Ring is pretty okay with letting you be in an isolated bubble all by yourself. You will see a few community aspects such as bloodstains or player notes, but that doesn't really do enough for me. And when you're playing with other people in Elden Ring Night Rain, you can definitely do a few things that are just for fun that the community will understand. Spamming L1 when you beat the boss, or trying to draft a really good team comp is a fun way that the community will work together. It really is just a shame that this game didn't have voice comms, a better pinging system, or even a text message chat to type to your teammates. On console, the text message chat may be a little bit hard to implement since you're on a controller, but on a PC, it definitely would have been a great implementation. The final thing I do want to say about the community is that there isn't another Souls-like team that's as good as From Software, so we're all kind of stuck with each other whether we like it or not. Most of us are dedicated fans that will buy any Soulsborne game that From Software puts out, so we're all going to be seeing each other for the foreseeable future. So let's try and make the best of it. Anyway, that's my list. If there's something that I missed, you can definitely let me know in the comments, and if you found any joy out of this video, liking or subscribing really does help. Thank you, and have a good day.